Welcome back into the Play-by-Play, a sports media talk show from Awful Announcing, where we're finally talking about basketball. I am Brendan Clean, a staff writer at Awful Announcing. That is Ben Axelrod, a senior editor at Awful Announcing. Today, big changes at Meadowlark Media. Amazon rounds out its NBA broadcast team as we get a little closer to knowing who's going to be calling games for the next decade plus in the hoops world. But first, our instant replay. The Caitlin Clark train isn't slowing down, Ben. The preseason return to the University of Iowa for the sensation that is Caitlin Clark. It was her and the Indiana Fever versus the Brazilian national women's basketball team. 1 o'clock Eastern on a Saturday on ESPN, 1.3 million viewers. It feels like every time I think like, oh, that'll be a cool little event, like whatever, we'll see. The number, the attention, the virality, it blows my mind every single time that she does something new and gets a new opportunity. It's always bigger than I think it's going to be.
It's crazy. I actually, something I've thought a lot about in terms of Caitlin Clark and like the way we cover her. And, you know, last year there was just so much bullshit with everything that was happening through no fault of her own, but off the court with the comments in the media and some of the stuff going on with her and the players. And that tends to get like focused on. And I think like the two things we may be undercovered, including us at Awful Announcing, is like, one, she lived up to the hype. Like she had like an all WNBA caliber rookie season. And two, like that surge in popularity that they experienced at Iowa and through the final 2 seasons of her college career translated to the WNBA. Like there was real tangible popularity that surged with her coming into the WNBA. And so I think now, like, kind of the natural conversation is like, okay, is this sustainable, or was this like a thing of curiosity? And all indications are this is now totally sustainable. Like the fact that this is not only carrying over into year 2, but carrying over into her preseason games. And I know this was kind of a special circumstance with her returning to Iowa, but still, like, I can't recall anything like this from an NBA standpoint in terms of just like instant impact in the league. Like you'd have to go back to Magic and Bird, I would think.
Yeah, if you're talking about where it started versus where it's at, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, LeBron obviously and Steph have been huge draws, but they kind of take that crown back and forth from each other. They're not singular forces, and they were starting post LeBron or post Jordan, at least LeBron was, where they were almost just getting it back to some of where it had been, not catapulting it up. So yeah, I mean, but the preseason, like, people have been posting all over that, you know, this would be the 3rd highest rated NBA preseason game on television ever, behind a couple of different LeBron preseason games. I looked back at some of the Grizzlies Thunder, which was like the lowest viewed postseason first round series from this year's NBA playoffs, and it was on TNT, not even NBA TV, so pretty close to 1-to-1 of a cable network like this ESPN game was. And it's like 2/3, 70% of a playoff game featuring the league MVP in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And she's doing that for the lesser league, quote unquote, in the preseason against a Brazilian national team where no American has any real awareness of who those players are, and they got killed. You know, the game
was 108 to 44.
So it's like there's nothing to watch outside of I just want to see this person as much as I possibly can. Like that is about as distilled of an illustration of her popularity as you could possibly get, because nobody was watching that for the basketball.
No, and that's that's a part of this. Like there's kind of a spectacle aspect to this. I think a big part of it was her going back to Iowa because so much of her popularity is rooted in her college career. But like, it's not just that. Like all indications, right, are that this is going to carry over into the regular season. The Fever have basically their entire schedule is going to be broadcast on a national basis. They totally expanded all of the local television markets that Tegna is carrying the games around Indianapolis. Like this is a really big deal, and I think it's going to be really interesting to just see, like, especially to me, what really stands out, and I think we've talked about this already, is that a year from now, ESPN has to fill its baseball void. Like they're losing Sunday night baseball a year from now. And like the cleanest way that they can replace Sunday night baseball is to give the WNBA a national spotlight on Sunday nights. And I think that when you look at the way that they're going to replace baseball on their schedule between the end of the women's tournament at the start of April and heading into the WNBA schedule, like I think you could make a pretty strong argument that them being willing to walk away from their MLB contract was a vote of confidence in women's basketball. And I think a lot of that ties into Caitlin Clark and the surge in popularity that the league has experienced over this last year and a half or so.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that this should get the level of media attention in terms of it's not 1-to-1, there's fewer games there, whatever else, but like this is Jordan, and the way that we saw Turner and NBC rally around that, if the success follows as we expect it to, at some point the popularity will plateau. But the other part of it is, like, I think the comparison that we're going to see this year is more so of the second, her senior season at Iowa, and the buildup we saw from junior to senior season. That's what I think we're going to see from year 1 to year 2 is the now they're going to be great. I know Iowa made the Final Four both of those seasons, but they made the championship game both of those seasons. But like they, on the more of a basketball, less of a media side, like they got some veterans in the building. They are expected to be a decently high playoff seed. They're going to actually be winning like we saw in the second half of last season. They're not just going to get swept out of the playoffs, most likely the way that they did last year. Like, it's on its way up still. And so if any of these places, obviously next year's when the new media deal goes into effect, but if I'm ESPN or CBS or Ion or whatever the current partners are, I know the schedules are already set, but I'm clearing everything out. Like I'm making sure that these games are in a perfect position to succeed. And we've seen ESPN especially build up like more studio coverage, more, kind of secondary shoulder type stuff to just promote this, because you want to be seen as the place to watch her. Like no matter what else is going on, that's the priority, and we're already kind of seeing it.
Well, let me ask you two questions about this, because you are a little more in depth when it comes to your WNBA knowledge than I am. One, we'll start here. Like, can this season be about basketball for her? Like, obviously, there's always going to be bullshit. Like, we see the way LeBron gets covered and the NBA gets covered at large. But like you mentioned, like the Fever obviously have improved a lot in the offseason. Like, can we get through a season where like the focus is on her and the Fever and how they're doing, as opposed to like her and Angel Reese or what Pat McAfee says about her?
I think it will be more about basketball because it took her a little while to get started last season. She had a pretty bad first half, and then after the Olympic break, which probably ended up being a blessing in disguise for her, not having to go to Paris and just ride the bench, but actually just get to rest because of, the college schedule goes right into the pro schedule for the women. And then she just was amazing all the way through the rest into the playoffs. But I think that'll help. I could easily see her, though, I could easily see her becoming an MVP candidate. And then it's going to be another mess. Like, I almost think the success will allow the conversation to be more about basketball, but that won't make it less bullshit, I guess would be my prediction. Because even if there's less of the racial, or do they appreciate her enough, or should she make the Olympic team, or is she more famous and should she be the next Y or Z player? I guess it'll be less ridiculous to ask those questions and try to talk about it because she's not going to be a rookie. But the conversations won't go away because she actually will be able to back it up now. Does that make sense? Do you agree with what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, that's kind of where I was heading with this is like, what's could she, like, I think I saw a tweet from you about her and in MVP odds or MVP takes about her. Like, could she be an MVP candidate this year? Like, is that a viable jump for her to make? Like, she was, I think, first team all WNBA. She led the league in assists. Like, I don't, it seems like a kind of a shorter leap right now than you would think for most NBA players coming into the league in year two.
Well, that's the thing, right? Like the reason it's somewhat realistic is because these players just come in older, so they're very good right away. Like rookies have won MVP in the WNBA before. It's just a little different because they're as old as guys in NBA in their third, fourth, fifth seasons, even as rookies or second year players. It's just different. But I mean, if the Fever jumped, they already made the playoffs and they were really young and not that good last year. Now they added like 2 or 3 real vets that are like forwards and wings, like the right type of players around her. And all the young players got a year older, including her. They're going to be a good team. And I just checked FanDuel while you were asking. She's the favorite right now.
Yeah. I mean, she'll have the narrative on her side.
Exactly. And that's where I think the ugliness is going to come in is like if she's, statistically, team success, the stuff we would normally think about with MVP, like if she's what, a really analytical person would say is maybe the third or fourth most valuable player in the league, that's going to be enough to have her win it because of all the voters who don't pay attention to anybody but her or just like the story of it. Like that's where it's going to get ugly. And I think the players and media who want to side with the other players are going to have a valid case to be kind of frustrated by that. That's going to be pretty unprecedented, even with how popular other players have been throughout sports. That just doesn't happen very often, but I really think it could with her.
And then my other question about this would be, like, she is established. She is a draw. She is a star. She moves the needle. Like, I know there are a lot of good players in the WNBA, great players in the WNBA. I know she's not even the best player in the WNBA. And I know like Angel Reese is not on her level in terms of star power, but like Angel Reese is a pretty fairly famous athlete at this point, even in her career entering year two. But like with Paige Beckers coming in and with Asia Wilson winning MVPs, like where does this league stand in terms of sustainable star power outside of what we already know about Caitlin Clark being a proven draw?
I think it's getting to a better place. I mean, I think there's a little bit of a blip here where Caitlin and Paige and to a lesser degree Angel were really good and really famous dating back almost to high school, if not at least early in their college careers. I would say the only person really left that rivals that would be Juju Watkins, who tore her ACL, and that's a little bit of a setback for her being kind of the next one. But like, we should have already heard about the next, who's the freshman, who's the high school senior that are going to keep that going. And like, that's natural for any sport. But I do think like this is an era now, this is a generation, and they're going to be the faces for a while. I don't think there's like, oh, and then it'll be such and such, So maybe that's good, maybe that's bad. But it feels like Paige, Caitlin, Angel, Juju, those are going to kind of be the superstars here for a little while that carry the league forward. And, that veteran, the people who are actually like winning championships with Asia Wilson, Brianna Stewart, like they're probably going to be, of course, in the mix. They're not aging out either. But I mean, with Caitlin though, like in general, where do you feel like she sits among like the biggest must see appointment type of spectacles in sports right now? I mean, that's kind of where she's at. Like she's in the across all athletes conversation at this point. Not even just basketball, let alone not just the WNBA. Like I can't think of a lot of other things in sports that are going on where it's like I need to get a bite of that. I need to check my phone to see the highlights. I need to, if I'm at home, I'll watch it. If they're in my city, I'm going. Like it's messy. And that's a little different with the TV side of it, but he's been a huge draw in terms of attendance and everything. I mean, LeBron, Steph, like those guys, it's not as novel, but they're still obviously up there. Maybe Otani. Like, it's what else? Who else is on that list?
I mean, I live 5 hours from Indianapolis, and I've considered like going to a Fever game, like taking my kids to go see the Fever within the last year based on all this. And like, I didn't go to the Royal Rumble in Indianapolis. Like, I am not just driving to Indianapolis willy nilly. And actually, like, it wound up being the tickets were too expensive because like that's how it works with Caitlin Clark. Like, you're not going to get in for cheap into most of these games at this point, even in Indianapolis. And so
Even in Iowa.
Yeah. In Iowa, it was like $650 average
Yeah.
tickets. I saw it sold out in 15 minutes. Like, I would have taken the under on that. But like, she's like, if you get a text like Caitlin Clark has like 30 points in the first half, you're going to turn on the game. It's like, it's her and Steph Curry. Like, it's like, those are the two, I think, athletes who you feel like are just like capable of doing insane things on a nightly basis that you're not going to see anywhere else. So I think like from a pure electricity standpoint, she is like toward the top of that list at this point. And I just think in terms of overall influence, like I thought a really good take earlier this month was, or last month at this point, was Colin Cowherd being aghast that she wasn't on Time's list of the most 100 influential people. And that stood out to me too. When we got through that, we got that list and we were going through it to see which sports figures were on it.
Yeah,
I
did
was
they just
stunned.
get scared off by by the hoopla that came with naming her the athlete of the year last year, and they were just like, let's just spread the wealth a little bit and move on from that nonsense.
It must, like, you'd have to think they have some sort of like algorithm where it's like, okay, we can do X number of athletes, X number of basketball players, X number of female athletes. We already did her 6 months ago, but like, she should be on that list. Like, she is one of the most, forget women, she is one of the most influential athletes in the world right now. So that's like, that was just such a glaring omission. So, I mean, whatever, her stock is at an all-time high. It looks like it's only ascending. And that number was just jarring. 1.3 million for a preseason game, totally jarring.
Completely jarring. The last thing I'll say that I'm looking forward to this year, regardless of the success or MVP or whatever, is one part of the argument that got completely drowned out by the more obnoxious complaints about her talking about, in those Time articles, kind of giving a nod to the historical players that came before her and everything that people said she was overstating it or trying to kind of get in good with people or almost like back her way into an apology for her success and her popularity. I didn't buy a lot of that, but the part of it that I did buy that seemed reasonable to me that I heard some people say that were making that case was that she has had to kind of hold back her like the insane competitiveness that she very clearly has. Like, I would recommend people, and I don't know if you watched it, Ben, but the interview she did on the David Letterman Netflix show, My Next Guest Needs No Introduction, and some clips from it went viral. But they did like a bowling thing, and then they did this game where they were throwing different colored grapes into a wine glass. And it's the same as the Last Dance clip of Jordan playing the coin game with the security guard. She's like just a motherfucker. Like, she's like legit wanting to beat David Letterman's ass at this grape throwing game, and he's 70 and not even trying. You know what I mean? Like, and I think like the showmanship you saw with her taking the not even logo shots, more like half court shots in that Brazil game. I don't think she's going to do that in a real pro game, but like doing that, shouting out Ryan Rocco on the ESPN broadcast in real time, and just the confidence of all of that, the kind of like bravado of all of that, I do think we're going to see a little more of that start to come out, and that's just going to kind of put it over the top. And I'm looking forward to it because like I want to see that. She has every right to be as confident as she is, and people love it.
Yeah, I haven't seen the Letterman clip. I did read, though, the Wright Thompson profile from her senior year at Iowa, and I think you got it. It felt very Kobe-ish. It felt like there was a lot of Kobe influence in her personality and in her general demeanor. And then to watch, I mean, I followed her since her junior year of college and through her senior year, and then to see her in her rookie season. And it was just inherently awkward. And like there was the stuff with Diana Taurasi and what Diana said and however that was perceived. And just like it was always going to be this awkward thing where she was coming into the league as a rookie, but already the most famous player in the league and somebody with enormous expectations. And I think even in this preseason, like you've seen like the comment she left on Lexi Hull's Instagram, making fun of her like tanning before media day. And like, just you're starting to see that confidence and that bravado peek its way out. And I also think I think this year you'll start to see it. And then by the time she gets to year 3, it's like the league is going to be filling with other players who have grown up looking up to her already. Like we forget like how quickly like this league is going to be her and a bunch of people who were idolizing her when they were high school players. And so I think you'll see that come out sooner rather than later. And you're already starting to see it come out. But yeah, I think that's another part of all this that has been a little undercovered, is just like how awkward that push and pull was for her last year. And now that she does have that standing as a all league player and as somebody who led the league in assists and just somebody who's here in year 2, like I think you're really going to see her take the reins as the face of the league, as she should.
Yeah. All-Star weekend is in Indy this summer for the W, and it will be more Caitlin Clark for sure. Let's get into it though. John Skipper leaving Meadowlark Media as part of broader changes around the Dan Le Batard show. So there's a lot going on here, Ben. We know for sure that John Skipper is leaving the company. He co-founded this he was obviously the former president of ESPN. He left under unceremonious circumstances like a decade ago, and then resurfaced after some little jobs here and there when Le Batard left ESPN. They co-founded this Meadowlark Media company. We were all, I think, in this world a little bit uncertain as to what the company was exactly or was trying to be. They did some documentary deals. They did some narrative podcast stuff. And now he's gone. We know that because Le Batard thanked him on X, confirmed that Meadowlark's going to continue to do some of that film and documentary stuff. But I think we would all agree the main things that they're known for remain the Dan Le Batard show with Stugotz, and to a lesser degree, Pablo Torre Finds Out, which Pablo Torre launched a couple years ago and has grown pretty quickly, got some awards and everything else, does like investigative journalism and real, things that have broken through and really made an impact. But that show, the signature Dan Le Batard show, is also undergoing some changes where Barrett Media reported that Stugotz, John Wiener, is stepping back, quote unquote. Little uncertain what that exactly means. And if you look at it from one direction, it might not be that much of a change from his role for the past year or so. He's been on less and less. He already, had only been on 3-4 days a week, even throughout the entirety of the post-ESPN era of this show. So let's just kind of stop there and survey the landscape of those changes before we get into anything big picture. What do you make of this? Bad timing? Maybe a bigger deal than the headlines would suggest? Or is it actually this is a really significant media story?
It's hard for me to imagine that the Skipper news is good news. And I don't know too much about like what went into that, but the fact that they're up for their next deal, right? Like that's kind of in the backdrop of all of this, is their deal with DraftKings is set to expire. Dan said in March, in a few months. I think if you put together the timeline of when the deal started, it's probably a safe assumption that sometime around June is when the deal expires.
Yeah, initially 3 years, and then it seems like up for one more last year. But
yeah, I don't know if there was an option or something, but yeah,
hard to tell. And now it seems like they're really up against it.
Yeah, and that's and in the backdrop of all that, then is that DraftKings has obviously undergone shifts in its own strategy when it comes to content. And so I think it's fair to wonder like how interested they would be in doing a similar deal. The reporting has indicated like they've been in talks, but here we are, thinking we're probably a month out from this thing and there's still no deal. Dan, alluded to in his statement about Skipper that they had exciting news to share when it came to audio and video distribution. So you would think it's either a DraftKings deal, either they're re-upping with DraftKings or finding a new home. But I think that's I think these are kind of, obviously these are all connected in a way, but I think the Skipper one, that one, just the timing doesn't seem great to for one of your co-founders and, effectively, I think he was, their CEO, for him to leave before this new deal kicks in. I don't think that's probably great. And in terms of Stugatz,
well, can I jump in on that part?
Sure.
I think so I would say that I have pretty solid confidence that even with the changes, which we'll get to with Stugatz and other people that have happened to the Le Batard show, like we all know, it's still a pretty significant headline maker. It's still very popular. When you look at the deals that any number of shows, distribution deals that they've gotten, whether it's like Rich Eisen and what he's doing, peppering his stuff across a bunch of platforms of syndication, or it's even just digital first, like, the Kelseys are the top level example, but whatever you want to look at, there's a market for the Dan Le Batard show. I don't know if it's at DraftKings, but they're going to make that show, and it surviving as the anchor of the network makes sense to me. Now, the thing that has to happen there is like that show has to be big enough for somebody to pay enough for it to fund all the other stuff, right? Because like I don't think anything else they've done has been regular enough or successful enough to tell me that it's funding itself in perpetuity, right? Like I don't think that that's what's going to happen. So maybe from one angle you could look at it and say, well, that was Skipper's side of the business. Le Batard had his side, and maybe that side. I know in the statement Dan said like they're going to continue to produce it, but if it's at a significantly less volume, maybe they just don't need Skipper, and we see them hire, what the Volume and Barstool and these types of people have hired, which is more just these very savvy, I know how to go to Spotify or NBC or Sirius and get deals done. And if that's the type of person, that is a little different than what Skipper had been doing. We know Skipper wants to do journalism and he wants to be, impactful and progressive and all these things. And maybe that just didn't really fit if that stuff wasn't really coming to fruition. So I could see it, but it's just not good optics, if nothing else.
Right. Well, and to just factor in, the report about Stugatz and everything else, it's just like just going back to New York, it just felt like a slew of headlines that left you wondering what's going on there. And then there's also a lack of transparency from Dan, not addressing the Stugatz report on air or on social media. You mean the
blow up elephant wasn't addressing?
No, he's done that bit before too. I wonder though.
Do you think it's the same elephant?
No, the others were stuffed Dumbos. When he got in trouble for talking about Trump on ESPN in like 2019, simpler times. But like sticking with the documentaries and all that stuff, like it sounds like, based on the reporting, they are kind of slowly phasing out of that. They say that they'll still do it, but once you kind of hit reverse on that, it's kind of hard to go the other way. Like, I guess my thing is like, do they need to be doing that? Like, they to this point, they've only really done what Good Rivals, the USA Mexico one, and for Prime, and then the Boston Red Sox one for Netflix. And like, I don't know how much, I mean, they barely talked about those things on their own shows. You watch them, they didn't really have like kind of the distinct Meadowlark Media type of like flavor or style. I just wonder, like,
they were pretty replacement level. I mean, I mean that not as a criticism, but just very few documentaries these days really stand out. I wouldn't say those ones did.
Yeah, I would agree with that. They were kind of just boilerplate sports documentaries. I'm sure if you were a Red Sox fan or a soccer enthusiast, like you probably loved them, but they didn't. I don't think they broke through in the way they were looking to do when they got into documentaries. And so, we'll see. I think they still have the Diana Taurasi one in the works, but it feels like they left ESPN and maybe they got too much freedom and they wanted to do kind of everything. And in the process, I think, which brings us to the show. Like, did they lose sight of the main thing? Like, did they lose sight of the show? Because the show now is not the same show that they had when they first left ESPN. There's been a multitude of reasons for that, but I think the biggest one would be Stugotz has less of a presence on it. And the heart of that show has been Dan and Stugotz's relationship and the yin and yang of them. And Stugotz has not
two-hander, to use a movie term, a little bit of a two-hander, right? Like it couldn't be more polar opposites.
Yeah, and Stugotz has not regularly been a part of that show. It feels like for the last 6 months, and it really changes the dynamic of that show. And so it seems like based on the reporting, based on some of the stuff John Ourand has put out there, like it seems a little bit like they want to get back to basics and they kind of want to reinforce the show and get the show. I don't know if back on track's the right wording, but they want to, it seems like that's going to go back to being the flagship Meadowlark program with Pablo Torre finds out also kind of sprinkled in.
Which I think is how it should be. Like I you know what this whole story made me think of, because the other changes have been Mike Ryan stepped down as executive producer like a year ago. He was really integral to the show's texture, vibe, its eccentric kind of the thing people liked about it. I would say Mike had a lot to do with.
Yes.
And he was an on-air voice, especially post ESPN. He I think also counterbalanced the things people don't like about Dan Le Batard, right? The preachy nature that if it's something you agree with or if it hits the right tone, you really like it, and he can break through and really has developed a respect from his audience that way. But at other times as they battle about on air frequently, it can feel a little bit old. It can feel a little bit stale. And I think there's just less confining Dan, which, he's still maintained a huge audience, but I think that's made the product a little bit worse. There's also like all these women who have left the show. I can't help but notice that pattern that Jessica Smetana, who you mentioned, Charlotte Wilder, Lucy Rodin, there's 3 people that they hired over the course of this company that have all stepped back or scaled back or left. That doesn't feel great. It's just all these things that kind of made it this yin and yang that I think made the show special are a little bit are gone. But as far as the network goes, it made me think of the quote, which got a lot of criticism, and at the time, given there was like a labor dispute at the company, rightly so. But when Bill Simmons said to the New York Times like 5 years ago that he wasn't treating the Ringer as an open mic night.
Yeah.
I got what he was saying.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that some other companies have illustrated what Simmons was trying to protect against. And as much as it's probably not the right thing to say when you're a CEO and your company's trying to unionize.
And you're regularly having your daughter and your dad on your shows.
Yes, exactly. Like there's a lot of holes you can poke in the statement, but if you just sort of treat it as like a mission statement for the Ringer or a mission statement for a company that's basically trying to be the Ringer, which is like what Meadowlark sort of is minus the written stuff on the website, it actually is pretty solid governing principle, which is I think Meadowlark kind of overestimated its audience in a way where they had this, I think, optimism that anything that they put together, because it had the Le Batard show smell to it, the audience would flock to and it would be a success without thinking about, does this talent have a point of view and an audience built in? Are they good enough to hold down a show by themselves at the national type of level that we need them to be? If you look at the Ringer or the Volume that Colin Cowherd has put together, even Barstool, those Cowherd, Simmons, Portnoy, those 3 have a really good eye for saying, we're going to bring person X who wasn't in our umbrella into it, and their like point of view and the audience they've already built, coupled with our brand and our distribution and our production support, is going to elevate them to a point where they can have a standalone, profitable, popular thing. feels like Levitard was like, oh, by the way, this person who's like the sixth rung of our ladder is doing something where they talk about some random topic. Go check it out if you want to. It's like, well, I could have told you that wasn't going to work. And that was kind of their blueprint for building a network out, was people who you like because they chime in a dozen times throughout the 4-hour Levitard show are now going to be talking about this niche thing that they care about, and you should therefore go chase it down. No one else is really operating like that, and I don't think that was ever going to be hugely successful. So that's them departing from what these other companies are doing that has worked. I feel like is the biggest mistake that they've made.
I think a part of that too is, I mean, like, just as I've been a diehard fan of the show for probably close to 15 years at this point, like definitely over 10 years. Like I've been very involved in that community. And I would say I feel like there's been kind of a loss of a community around the show. And that's something that Dan always talked about, was the community they have around the show, and how he was willing to take this leap leaving ESPN because he knew that the community would follow him. And I think even just speaking to the lack of transparency over the report about Stugotz, it's like we're getting more information right now from Mike Ryan's private Twitter service, his Twitter subscriptions, than we are from the show itself, which seemingly always prided itself on like keeping the audience in the loop and being transparent and not talking to us like we're dumb. And I think as a lot of these business things have happened, you've had, podcasts get canceled. You've had talent, I don't know if you could say exodus at this point, but I mean, you just named off, a half a dozen talent who have kind of moved around places since over the course of the last few years. And when it's not,
they're basically back to the original crew at this
point.
Right.
And so that's when you did have that original crew, then you would kind of get that built-in equity where it's like, you know what, I will listen to a podcast that Billy Gill co-hosts. I mean, Mike Ryan went from producer to talent basically on his own. And so like, I do think when you have that community, then you can take some of those leaps of faith, but I don't get that sense that community is still there and just exploring their Reddit. I don't think that's like an unpopular sentiment. So I think like I would
a lot
just
of
like
uncertainty in the in like the Reddit and just people even on Twitter or whatever. It's kind of just like, what's going on?
Yeah. And so that's, I mean, to the Stugotz thing. So the Stugotz thing is I did think the report was not fairly phrased in terms of the headline. I think the headline was that he was stepping back from Meadowlark Media, which made it sound like he was leaving Meadowlark, which isn't the case. I mean, he was on the show Monday and he's going to have a reduced role, and he's had a reduced role. But I do think when that report is out there, like, it should be addressed. And I found it disappointing that it wasn't addressed.
Yeah. And not only not addressed, but like trying to kind of tease at it, not only with the elephant thing, but even he posted a picture of himself and said at the studio the next day, it said like, I'm here,
right?
Whatever. It kind of brings me to the last thing, and I'll try to keep it short because I went long on the last point that I made. But I think like the other element that made that show really break out at ESPN was obviously the us against them kind of, not just with Levitard's political stuff, but just always kind of making fun of, almost like, can you believe we're here? We're the guys inside the room poking fun and putting whoopee cushions down at all the other people in the room that are stuffy old, sports media execs, whatever. Like that was a big part of its charm. But it almost feels like in the environments that they're trying to compete in now, which is primarily YouTube and, digital platforms, even to the degree that they still goof around and try to do that stuff, they're always going to be a step behind compared to, of course, like truly chaotic young people culture on those platforms. But even like McAfee. I mean, McAfee just swooped around and stole their lunch money, basically. It's like you're never going to outdo that vibe considering that McAfee's already doing it, where they're going to legal repercussions be damned, talk about something like the Ole Miss saga, and they're going to dip into, um, they're going to curse and be loose and have actual like transgressive personalities like Boston Connor or whatever, who's going to talk about conspiracies and try to get in trouble every chance he get. Like, you're never going to compete with that stuff in the same way. So I do think it's a little bit of like finding what the North Star is, because on YouTube you're one of a million people trying to act like that. At ESPN you were the only one, right?
Well, I think the push and pull for them, and it's certainly not unique to them. I mean, this is the this is the eternal push and pull of being in this industry, is you want to do good stuff, but you also want to do stuff that people are watching. And those that there's not always an overlap in those two things. And so like you can want to do like a very creative type of radio show or make a creative type of documentary, but at the end of the day, like you need people to watch it. And I think you have seen like some attempts from Dan to like address topics and to talk about topics that are more aimed at getting eyeballs. I mean, it's a gold mine for us, because as much as he talks about like ESPN and Stephen A. Smith and all that stuff, it becomes content for us to write about. But you also get the sense like the audience is like kind of over Stephen A. Smith talk.
And everyone's doing it too,
Right.
right? Like Marcellus Wiley has a YouTube channel in his basement where he mines our headlines and does reactions to it. So good luck beating that out,
Right.
like, yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I think it's just kind of a push and pull. I think that they just have not found that happy medium, and it's a different time for the show. The other thing is Dan and Stu are 20 years into this thing. Like they literally just celebrated their 20th anniversary. There have been times where I've wondered, like, have I just heard everything Dan Le Batard has to say on every topic? Like I can kind of predict his stances because I've listened to him for 4 hours a day now for 15 years. And so I do wonder if there's some of that. I wonder if like they're just kind of in this weird transition where they need to figure out what the next phase of the show is. But yeah, I mean, it's been impossible not to notice the slew of headlines over the last couple of weeks.
Finally, Amazon making 4 hires for their NBA broadcast crew officially. We'll sift through what has been rumored in all these places, but that is now locked in place. The NBA on Prime will employ Dwayne Wade, Steve Nash, Candace Parker, and a surprise one that had not been reported, Udonis Haslem. They will all be analysts for the company. All 3 but Haslem will be splitting time then between the studio and the game booth. In addition, we've talked about these before, but just to reiterate, Kevin Harlan and Stan Van Gundy reportedly in line to be hired to call games. Not official yet. Kevin Harlan's been hanging in the balance for a while. Not sure what the deal is there. I could see with his loyalty to TNT, maybe just wanting to be respectful. Maybe that's what the holdup is. We'll see. What did you think of the Amazon side of it before we broaden out from there? Those are 4 pretty big names, especially the first 3.
Yeah, we talked about the Steve Nash one a little bit last week with your hot mic. I think they're crushing it. I think that they are putting together a crew that really matches, I think, the ethos of what they're going for when it comes to their NBA coverage. I mean, they're pretty full now, right? Like it's like they have more talent than their package kind of calls for at this point, it feels like. I mean, you will have guys miss certain weekends and stuff like that, but it seems like
I didn't mention Ian Eagle, of course, is the lead play-by-play. Taylor Rooks will be the anchor of the studio and probably do some reporting, as she's done for Thursday Night Football for them for a while now. And then they had already hired Blake Griffin and Dirk Nowitzki. So, yeah, I think this might be pretty close to it.
Yeah, I mean, it's I think the smallest portion of the NBA package. So they've got 2 broadcast crews, it seems like. They've got a rotating cast in their studio, but I think in terms of like who they hired, like it feels very of this generation. It feels like probably the most modern collection of NBA players. We're so used to guys who were prominently featured in the 90s, kind of ruling the roost when it comes to the NBA media. And now this is like our 2000s and our 2010 crew. So I think it's really promising. You do have kind of a lack of experience when it comes to a lot of these guys, but I think, that was the case when it came to Amazon's approach to Thursday night football as well. And I think we've kind
for
of
the
seen that
studio.
bear out with their studio show or their on-field crew. So I think it's really promising. I think Amazon has kind of emerged as having a strong eye for talent, even when it comes to guys who aren't necessarily proven. So I'm more than willing to give them the benefit of the doubt.
I'm surprised that they got the big names that they did, considering their package is relatively small, right? Like, I
Mm-hmm.
know Candace Parker will be splitting time with the WNBA when that starts in 2026. So that was probably appealing to her. But NBC has the same thing. They're going to have all three of the NBA broadcasters are going to have WNBA rights. So, yeah, young and famous seems to be the guiding principle. And we've never really had that with NBA broadcasts in the last, since the league got big, because I guess the closest would be when Barkley joined TNT and Kenny was still relatively young, and
Mm-hmm.
those guys had just finished playing, and probably their name recognition was at an all-time high. I mean, Barkley's maintained it, but by the time Shaq joined that show, the other guys were already, veterans. ESPN is, the closest they've gotten to the famous side would be when they had Magic for a little while. But I mean, flanking him was like Jalen Rose and Bill
Yeah.
Simmons and Doug Collins. These guys were not anybody's idea of, you know, celebrity analysts. So that's not to say they'll be awesome at it, but I think it's definitely going to attract attention if nothing else. And I just think there's something to be said for, like, it's not to say that these guys are like not capable of breaking down modern basketball, but I don't get the sense that a lot of the people on TV are really putting that much of an effort in to understand the game and how it's changed. They're mostly content to just shred it. You know what I mean? So I think it will be a breath of fresh air for fans, especially younger fans, kids playing basketball right now, whatever, to just have people who are actually invested in appreciating and trying to give a shit about what's happening on the court. It's been a while.
Yeah. And it seems like even, as like I said, inexperienced as some of these guys are when it comes to being in the media, like you can kind of see the roles already forming where Steve Nash does seem to be that kind of like X's and O's type of on-court guy with the mind the game and all of that. I think you'll get a lot of like fun stuff from Dirk and Blake Griffin. I think Dwayne Wade's kind of like an in-between of the two, but I think you can kind of see the way that's taking shape. But yeah, I just think even beyond guys who give a shit, like just guys who are more connected to this generation, guys who played
Yeah.
with guys who are still in the league. I think that's, if you want to fault, TNT, which nobody ever seems to do when it comes to their coverage, other than complaining about how much they complain about things. I think that's something that they've kind of fallen out with. You have it when Draymond drops in here and there, maybe Vince Carter to a degree because he played for 22 seasons. But like, I think that this, Dirk, Steve Nash, Dwayne Wade, Blake Griffin, like these are guys who were firmly entrenched with a lot of the guys who are still in this league. So I think that's a fresh aspect to it as well.
And kind of this cool thing we're seeing where there's like this pathway to get reps through podcasting and whatnot,
Mm-hmm.
and then get bumped up to the big leagues. We'll see if it works. If some of these guys seem really rough, then maybe that will be discounted in the future. But these guys aren't exactly like they retired last year. Almost all of them have media that they've done,
Yeah.
and now they're kind of just getting that promotion. So my question, as we get to NBC, Ben, is they've hired Jamal Crawford and Carmelo Anthony. Crawford will be a game analyst. Carmelo Anthony will be a studio analyst. Those both fit into the Amazon mold. Young, famous, right? I think that's pretty fair to say. They also have Reggie Miller, which maybe speaks to their package is a little bigger and more prominent. They want the authority that comes with Reggie, who's been the top guy at TNT for a long time now. Tarico, of course, will be there with him. And then Noah Eagle, even, I think, is pretty established at this point, even if he's still young. It almost surprises me that they're chasing the same types of things as Amazon in a way, because I had sort of imagined that they would go in a similar direction to what they've done with Sunday Night Football, wanting to be this real place of authority and big game. Like you hear them talk. They're getting Round Ball Rock back. They're bringing back the player pregame intros. But then the talent is sort of like, I'm interested, but we'll see. It almost feels like there's a little bit of a discrepancy there. It could work out. I'm not saying Carmelo's going to be bad at it, but it's different than bringing in Tony Dungy and Rodney Harrison.
Yeah. Well, I think the game broadcasts do feel a little more traditional. Like I think Mike Tirico and Reggie Miller is like probably as traditional of an NBA booth as you're going to get at this point. The question is like the studio show. And so we've seen on the football side, like, I'm not going to say they punt on the studio show, but like that is not a place where they have invested in it seemingly in the same way that the other NFL networks have in terms of acquiring high profile talent and guys with a lot of star power. So like Carmelo, I think Carmelo is like probably him or Wade is the biggest name of this hiring cycle. And so the fact that they do land Carmelo, I think is intriguing. Jamal Crawford isn't necessarily like as famous as these other players, but he has a proven track record when it comes to being an analyst, and probably the most proven track record of the guys we've talked about when it comes to his media work. But he's
really good. He's really good.
And so I think there is kind of a discrepancy between what's going to be more traditional and it almost seems like nostalgia heavy game broadcast, but then a studio that's a little bit more youthful and forward thinking. And so I think it's going to be interesting to see the way those two dynamics play out with each other.
What do you think of that approach in terms of trying to hark back to the classic NBA on NBC vibe? Do you think that will work? Do you think they have to kind of update it? It feels like they're really going to be they're telling us they're going to be very high on that nostalgia, but there is a whole generation, myself included, who wasn't really part of that, and we've only heard about it secondhand or in clips or video games or whatever else. What do you think of that approach?
I mean, I'm 36 and I think I'm at the tail end of like people who give a shit about that. And so like, that's like probably the first like true NBA season I remember is like the 97-98 season with Michael Jordan. So that was like kind of toward the tail end of the NBC package anyway. So I think you have to do it to a degree. Like it makes sense to lean on Round Ball Rock and some of the stuff with like using the AI announcer to recreate your 90s presentation. Like, I think that's kind of over the top. Like, I don't think that that's necessarily something that you need to be doing. That seems like nostalgia for nostalgia's sake a little bit. So I think it's going to be a dance. I think it's going to be a delicate one, but I understand like why you would want to at least implement some of those elements.
Maybe they are splitting the difference then. Maybe we kind of I answered my own question from the beginning where they are going to have elements that the older fans appreciate and remember and really speaks to like their best memories as a hoops fan, but then people who were 10 when Carmelo Anthony was in New York being at the top of his game are going to care because it's Carmelo Anthony, or maybe they checked out his podcast once upon a time and they know about his takes from that or something. I guess there's something to be said for it. And you're right, like Miller and Tirico on a conference finals game, that's going to feel like it should feel, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll be curious. I think to one part of it that is missing from what made those games special back then is how they handle the rest of the studio and the broader coverage, because that they have like 6 different groups of people on Sunday Night Football, and if you compare that to what they did with the NBA once upon a time, Bob Costas is as associated with those broadcasts as anybody. The intros, the storytelling, whatever. Maybe times have changed. You're not gonna. There's no next Bob Costas. People love to shit on Bob Costas nowadays anyway. Mm-hmm. But do they try to assemble some version of that. That would be my question.
I thought
as
the thing
far
you
as
were going to say was missing was the physicality and guys giving a shit.
load management, too many threes. We'll just get all that in there so people know that we're, I guess, doing NBA coverage right or something. Who's last question? Who's the most likely next shoe to drop with minimal but still some openings? Richard Jefferson or Doc Rivers?
Oh, I think Richard Jefferson at this point, because we know his contract status at least. I don't know. I feel like Doc
I think
might have
Doc would
burned
be
some
great.
bridges.
I loved Doc.
I think he might have burned some bridges on the way out with ESPN. They did not seem happy about the way that played out.
No, but maybe, yeah, I guess the game booth is maybe where there's the fewest openings left at this point. I don't know. Maybe these networks would be willing to bump out somebody to a lesser role if he became available. But maybe
it seems like
we're
Amazon
close to in place.
It seems like Amazon is maybe holding a spot. Like they've been very non-committal just about everybody's role. So I would think that would be for Richard Jefferson. And then at that point, like maybe Doc goes back to ESPN and leaves mid-season next year to take over the Lakers or someone. I don't know.
I just find it crazy. Like how upset can you really be? I mean, a coach went back to coaching. Like, did he do a blood pact that he wouldn't do that? I mean, I get it was quick. It was halfway through his first season. That sucks, but
you also knew who you were hiring.
Yeah, the last time he was a broadcaster was for a grand total of one season between the Magic and Celtics jobs like 2 decades ago, and then he did it again. It's not like he's 75 and you thought he was done. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
He went to coach Giannis. How
Right.
mad can you be? I don't know. I don't know about the behind the scenes, but it just at face value, if he became available and he would call the finals for you, I feel like you liked it one time. How would you not want to be in business with him again? Okay. Hot mics to close out, something that caught Ben or I's attention. We liked, we disliked. Maybe we just want to shout it out. Yours is playing off of mine, so should I go first?
You should go first.
Okay. Sticking on the topic of basketball, as I told everybody we would be hitting on plenty today. This isn't even really media. I just think this has been the best NBA playoffs I can remember in years. The one media angle is that everybody seems to agree with me because the viewership has been absolutely massive. I believe that one of the games over the weekend, maybe the Warriors-Rockets game 7, had almost 7 million viewers, which is absolutely absurd for a first-round game. It probably is going to take a little bit of a hit with the Lakers getting eliminated. Maybe the Knicks after this round, we'll see. But buzzer beater after buzzer beater, amazing performances from the best players, cool matchups that aren't just, Lakers Warriors or, round 2 of this rivalry we've already seen or something like that. Some newcomers with the Thunder and the Pacers and things that we're building a little bit of a history with. Anthony Edwards and the Wolves. It's just been amazing games, big moments, and we're like halfway through it. So we talk a lot this whole year about NBA negativity, everybody wanting to clown on the ratings. Is this new deal a big mistake from NBC and Amazon? Blah, blah, blah. It's been awesome.
Yeah, I've never done heroin, but I would imagine that it feels like what betting on these NBA playoffs has felt like, because every game is just like, I mean, this is basketball to a degree, but every game is just a collection of like 12-0 runs. It's just like, oh, this team's up 12, and then the other team's chipping away, and then they go on a big run themselves, and they're up 12. Like, it's just like that Knicks Pistons series was insane. Like, I cannot imagine, like, if you were like truly invested in that, and whether you're a Knicks fan or a Pistons fan or like a diehard like better, like that series was so back and forth, so up and down. It was the closest 6-game series I have ever seen. I still don't know like how the Pistons didn't win that series. And then just like to come back now in this first round with Pacers, Cavs, Knicks, Celtics. You have Nuggets, Thunder, in the way that game one went down. It's just been insane.
That game one, that game one was one of the craziest comebacks that I feel like I've actually. How often do you get where the free throw stuff that everybody hates about NBA games actually pays off? That's what happened in that Nuggets Thunder game. It was like, hold on, I actually like was rewarded for sitting through the boring last 2 minutes. Like, even this is happening. Even the worst part of NBA basketball turned out to be awesome.
So I fell asleep before the end of that game, full transparency, and I woke up to check the score, and I went to my CBS app, and the headline was like Aaron Gordon saves the day. And I thought it was a leftover headline from his putback against the Clippers. Like, I just thought I was like on the Saturday feed instead of the Monday night feed. So just an insane series, insane playoffs.
I would hope that heroin is better than that. I mean,
I don't know.
The side effects are pretty bad. So if it's worth going through that, I would hope it's better than like losing a bet or really grinding through a bad beat. I would hope heroin, at least on the front end, is pretty good from everything I gather.
Well, if you're winning the bet, it's good. And then if you're watching,
have you been winning?
Oh no, I've been on the wrong side of every bet against Jalen Brunson. Like, Jalen Brunson has just like tore my heart out in multiple ways. Like, I have.
It was the same last year with them. That Knicks Sixers series was insane. Then the Pacers, they seem to do that, which is probably good for the league. MSG going absolutely bonkers in big moments is a great thing. What's yours?
So mine's related to that, like you mentioned, and I have a theory like about Bill Simmons' new Spotify deal just totally reinvigorating him, because I feel like the sports guy has kind of been on a tear lately. Like, he's really kind of crushed it, I feel like, with his NBA coverage. I think that not only the Sunday night podcasts with Russillo, which have kind of become like his flagship podcast, but bringing Zach Lowe back into the fold, the stuff he does with Rob Mahoney on a regular basis, the stuff he's been doing with Kurt Goldsberry. Like, he just has this, like, the Ringer might have the best collection of NBA analysts when it comes to like guys who speak to the common fan, which is kind of how I approach viewing the NBA. And it's not always going to be the diehard. It's not always going to be the diehard stuff. I mean, you can certainly get that there, but just the rotating cast he has and the way he's, like, for all of Bill's faults, I'm quick to point them out. Like, he has been locked into the NBA this entire season when everybody else was bitching and complaining about it. You can never question his passion when it comes to the NBA. And I think it's been rewarded because we've gotten, like you said, a really awesome playoffs. And now, to me, like, he has that built up credibility where he's an authority on this kind of stuff, like he always has been. But I just think that whether it's bringing back Zach Lowe or the new Spotify deal or whatever it is, like, I feel like he's kind of been on a tear lately, and I wanted to shout out the sports guy.
I like it. I'll take it to a nerdy business angle, as I tend to, and ruin the end of the podcast, if that's cool. I think that he, the video stuff, which was clearly a huge element of them bringing him back, I think he pushed for that for a while, and they were resistant because they wanted to bring subs into the audio product first because they started there, and now they've realized that they need to evolve, and he's leading the way on the podcast side for doing that. But if you see how like patient and diligent they've been with their shows, and then if you watch the end result when they finally do catapult some of the shows to being video podcasts, it's not just you and I, on a screen.
Right.
It's much more there. People have made fun of like his intro because it has like first Pearl Jam and like sliding, like all of his little phrases and like bubble text everywhere. And it does look kind of funny. But to me, they are gearing up to sell it to TV. I think that's some of what might happen. I know that they want people on Spotify, but the fact that it's all on YouTube too, and it's so produced, and they're being so like, this one isn't, we're waiting. Okay, now this show is ready to be a video podcast. If you just kind of watch how they've approached it and really speed run it since he was reinvigorated, I would agree on that new deal. I think that they might be one of the first movers with this whole thing we're all waiting for of like what's going to be the first podcast to go to Netflix, and what I
Yeah.
think they're in really good position to do it.
So you mean Spotify sells it or leases it
Yeah,
to
something like
Netflix or
that.
to
They already had a
Amazon?
deal like that with FanDuel TV, right? The
Yeah.
Ringer did. Maybe they still do. I don't know. I don't watch sports betting operator digital cable networks personally, but I could see it. Maybe it's not even those shows in their exact form. Maybe it's some other. But I just think like that level of production is ahead of where almost any other digital shows are at. Even the volume, even these people who are like, we're video first, we're all in on this stuff. The Ringer is like surpassed them really quickly. And I feel like, why would you do that except to think either Spotify wants to really build out and have like be a competitor to Netflix? Maybe that's what's coming. That could be another direction it goes. But if not, like, I think they're going to be striking a deal with somebody in the more traditional TV space soon.
Yeah, they the production elements have definitely stood out to me, and it's one of those things where it's like, you and I hop on here in our sweatpants and talk for an hour, whereas they're like going into an actual studio. It's like to talk about White Lotus for an hour, like, and it's like, like that seems like that seems exhausting. Like, I know they're making good money for it, but it's like they're clearly treating this like these are real shows, and this is it's not
chyrons, lower third graphics, little transitions. I mean, if you think about it, The Ringer, when it launched, it had the HBO, the After the Throne show that they did.
Well, I was going to say that there's a natural tie there with HBO and all the prestige TV stuff they do.
Yeah, whether it's that or sports or whatever, it's almost like too well done at this point to only exist on an app where I can say switch to audio and ignore it. It's like they almost should be doing more with it, but
I agree.
We'll see. All right, that'll wrap us up. Hit follow, subscribe if you haven't already. We're here for you every single week talking about this wild world of sports media. We are also at awfulannouncing.com, breaking it down minute by minute. You can also find us on X, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, Facebook, Threads, wherever you're at on the internet. We are there for you as well, and we'll catch you next week.